Welcome back to the Valley to Peak Nutrition Podcast. This begins a two-part series that Lindsay and I are going to do over the next couple of weeks. And the focus of the topic is buzzwords. This was actually Lindsay's idea after having different conversations with her friends, seeing posts on social media, as well as other topics that have come up in our culture just within the last several years as nutrition has become more and more of a focus for many people. We could have tackled all 10 of these in one podcast, but that would be extremely long. So as I said, we've broken it up into two parts. This first week, we're going to cover our first four, which include things like GMOs, organic food, additives, and preservatives. All words that probably carry some meaning or some connotation in your mind just as you hear them. The second part will look at other words that do the same: processed foods, seed oils, saturated fat, inflammatory diets, antioxidants, and other things. As we tackle these things, we try to view them through the lens of what's the definition of each, what does the science actually say, and what's the general idea for each of them. Not in an effort to get you or any listener to change their mind from what they already do, but just to give you information so that you can make more informed decisions if you're thinking about any of these. And there's probably even more that we could add to this list. Without further ado, here is Lindsay and I covering the first four, and we'll cover the remainder next week. Do you want to provide a little bit of background to this?
Sure. This stemmed a bit from me usually people finding out that you're a dietitian, and they'll say, what does he say about these? Or what does he say about this word? Or isn't that unhealthy? Things like that, like wanting me to kind of be the go-between to ask you questions, which is totally fine. And you're always very willing to do that. You welcome the questions always. Also, I will often be out and about. This is typically with moms, just because that's who I'm around. And people might say things like, oh, I can't believe you feed your kids that. That's full of, blank. Or we only shop here because they make this type of food, or they only sell this type of ingredients, whatever. So I hear a lot of things about taboo foods, not so much foods, but ingredients. So people that will never have this certain nutrient in their food, or somebody that will never ever consume foods made with this type of substance in it. I ask because this comes out a lot, and other than wanting to understand it more myself, I want to be able to say people are full of it if they are. So
right. Lindsay sends me an email in all caps that says buzzwords. And so she has this idea of creating a list of the top 10 buzzwords that she's heard out and about, or that she gets asked about the most from people. And I looked at this list and she was 100% right. These are typically the ones that come up. So there's 10 different buzzwords or common things that we think about food. I'll tell you those here in just a second, so this makes more sense. But we're going to split it into two parts because I could see where this is going to get massively long if we tried to cover all 10 in one episode. So we're splitting it in two. So like, for example, today we're going to cover GMO, or genetically modified organisms. We are going to cover organic. We're going to cover preservatives, and we're going to cover additives. And then in part two, we're going to look at the general term of processed foods, seed oils, saturated fat, inflammation, and antioxidants. So this should get real interesting real fast. And I've given Lindsay complete permission to ask whatever she wants, and I'll answer to the best of my ability. So first up, we're going to cover genetically modified organisms, or GMOs. So I'm just going to let you on each of these topics ask the question or take this in whatever direction you want, and then do my best ability to do three things: answer what exactly each of these things are, explain like the background as to why there's some concern, and then try to provide as much clarity as I can as to whether or not the concern is valid. And when I provide the clarity, it's very important for me as a like just personal integrity and as a like a professional, I guess, to answer in a very objective way, not give you my personal opinion, not, whatever, like to tell you like what we know about this thing. And then you can decide whether or not, what you want to do with that.
There's no reason for me to be professional, and this is not tied to my reputation. So I'm just going to go for it. No, no, I am just going to go for it. I'm not going to lie. GMOs, here's what I've seen, heard, and I think this is kind of what people picture. There was a plant nursery near where we live some time ago. It's not there anymore. That had a big sign that was like non-GMO. I was like, okay, well, maybe. Honestly, my thought was like, do they not use pesticides? What does that even mean? I don't even know. I knew genetically modified. I didn't even know what's the O stand for. I didn't even know that was organism. I think when I hear people speak about foods with GMOs in them, they picture some like vial of poison being injected into strawberries or something, and them just like ballooning up full of poison. I don't know if that is true, but I think a lot of people, I mean, I know that's not true, but I think a lot of people just picture this very unnatural, unhealthy, dangerous chemicals. I think they think chemicals are going into stuff, but maybe not. But that's what I have come to understand is why we should fear them. So I don't know about them.
GMOs have been around for forever, and it wasn't really until like the last 10 years or so that people started expressing concern. I'm not even commenting on whether or not the concern is valid. That was just the case. And I'm fairly sure that it was President Obama who put some stipulations in place to where now we had to start labeling if food contained this or not. I think the fear comes in with the whole word like genetically modified, which is tied to DNA, right? It's sort of changing the organism, if that makes sense so far. Now, I think what people hear and or fear is that with the DNA, the genetic code has been changed in some way. Now, if you think about it, like we've been doing this forever with animals, right? If there's two different species or breeds of dogs, and you want to make a certain type of a dog, you get those two dogs together. They do what it is dogs do, and you have a crossbreed, right? This happens in a lab, which I think is probably where a lot of the fear stems from, because you are right. People are probably imagining Dexter in his laboratory mixing up some sort of a dangerous concoction. But to date, we have not seen anything that would warrant the fear. I think a lot of people for a long time thought that a genetically modified food would alter their DNA. And we have nothing that tells us that. Like we have nothing that we can trace back, at least to this point, that says if you eat a genetically modified food, it's going to alter your DNA because the DNA of that food is altered. And I think this whole concept is really hard for us to picture because you can't picture DNA, right? Like you picture this, what you see in a science book with is like this ladder looking like thing that's strung around different materials, and it's just hard for us to conceptualize. The reason that food companies or the industry as a whole would have interest in genetically modifying food is for a couple that really have nothing to do with altering DNA or even maybe for it to taste better, right? One of those would be if you we have genetically modified food to where it doesn't disrupt the soil as much because it doesn't require as much tilling. We have genetically modified food to where it doesn't require the use of as many pesticides because it's resistant to bugs and bacteria, right? And so we've genetically modified things to make them grow better so we can produce as much as we eat in the US. And I'll never forget this. When I was in college, I worked at a product development laboratory where we made infant formula for infants who couldn't breastfeed. And my bosses were food scientists who were, I mean, PhD, very smart people. And I had this topic come up when I was in college. So I asked one of my professors, Dr. Juan Gonzalez, I'll never forget him. And he commented and he said, I am in support of them, and I'll tell you why. The US could never grow enough food naturally without the use of a bunch of pesticides and to where we could feed the amount of food that US consumers demand, and or where we could have enough food to trade with other countries so it reduces costs for goods, right? Like, so if we trade, fruits and vegetables or whatever for another commodity from another country, it reduces our costs as it comes in. And his take was our costs would be so high on things without the use of genetically modified foods that we would either A, not be able to afford them to the point where we probably couldn't eat, or B, we would complain so much that it wouldn't make sense for it to even happen.
So you said to genetically modify something, it's happening in a lab, right? What if I were to go into that lab, what would I actually see happening? Do you have an example of a type of food that people do or don't want genetically modified? What happens in a lab to make that food more resistant, more durable, whatever?
That's the part that I think is hard to picture because you can't picture someone in a lab, in a white suit with a needle altering DNA, right? But that is essentially what's happening. So it's like I don't think that you can imagine it because it's taking place in the lab, and I think that's the part that we don't get that freaks us all out is that it's like in a petri dish. Not to say that it's in a literal petri dish, but it's in a science lab. So I think that's easier for people to imagine. So they're crossing the DNA of it, and sometimes it is to grow more, right? Like, so you're able to produce, like, maybe now you're able to produce 4 corn cobs on a stalk instead of 2, and so you're literally doubling the amount of corn on the same acreage to supply the amount of food. Oh, by the way, not only is that corn now more efficiently growing to where we can meet the US demand, but it's also more resistance to bugs. So now we're using less pesticide, and it's actually better than maybe it had previously been because it's been genetically modified. Now, again, like, all of that wouldn't matter if genetically modified food was actually harming us. Like, I don't think anyone would say, like, oh yeah, let's, grow more crops and more pesticide free crops in exchange for our lives. Like, no one would sign up for that. But we don't have anything that says that, that the fear is warranted. But I think that, like, a lot of these terms that we will cover, I don't think people know what to believe. And in our minds, we think, well, I don't really know, but doing non-GMO probably sounds like a safer bet. So I guess I'm just going to, support that cause and run with it. And the irony in all of this is, like, you go to the grocery store and costs are obviously going up. We've talked about this before. Much of what's driving the costs up is the consumer demand. So we want labels on all of these products. Okay, fine. And we want genetically modified free foods. Okay, fine. But all that costs money. All of that costs money from the manufacturer. So we can have all of these things. Meanwhile, I don't know that some of us, like, realize we're kind of the ones driving the costs up with the demands. And it would be one thing if we had all of this data that said, oh yeah, this was so toxic, and if you get rid of all of X, Y, and Z foods, I'm not even talking about GMOs, whatever label you want to strap to it, if we get rid of all of these different foods, then the consumer's health is going to go up so much. I think everyone, if there was something like that, would be willing to pay for it. But we don't have a lot of that. We have, like, some logic, but none of that logic is really supported by science. And that's the great thing about science, is it doesn't really care about your feelings. It only operates off of facts. And I think that's what's tough, is people don't know, and so they take the safer route and go in that direction. Go ahead. That's a good smile.
I can't remember. I learned it in college, or no, high school biology. I don't know. There was the guy that like cross pollinated the flowers, like a purple and a white, and then he got like a light purple. Or do you remember this? He was famous, and I feel embarrassed that I don't know his name. Anyway, is that what you could picture happening, like in a lab? Maybe like, hey, well, I can just think of strawberries for some reason. We'll pull out these strawberries, and we'll pollinate these ones here. It's not changing. I don't know. It's not adding or subtracting from it as much as kind of, I don't know, what do you call that process? I mean, modifying, I guess, but
No, I mean, that is a example that of something that can, and that's easier for us to see because we see two different flowers. It's easier for us to see a, certain breed of dog that's a clear distinction of like, oh, these are two different breeds, and I can see both breeds in this dog. Like, we can see where those things happen. There's other, like the Honeycrisp apple, I'm almost sure is an example of something that was genetically modified in the lab. Now, we grow it in a field, but that seed was genetically modified in a lab, if I remember right, to get a different flavor of apple, right? It wasn't like this, we had all these flavors at one point, they're modified. Some medications are also genetically modified, like insulin's an example of that. We genetically modify different medications to fight disease that saves some people's lives. So, this word that we're all like using without any degree of certainty as to like what it really is and if it's even true is not with complete fact. Now, if you as an individual, like everything in nutrition, you feel more comfortable buying GMO free, you feel better when you eat GMO free, all of these things, then I am not saying, oh, you shouldn't worry, go force yourself to buy nothing but genetically modified foods. I'm not saying that, but I am saying that today, this is what we know about it. And you have to make the decision that you're the most comfortable with within your own family. Next up, organic.
I heard a lot. And I have quite a few close friends who I love dearly who do eat as organic as possible. We got chatting one day with a few of these friends and and one of them shops at specifically a co-op that has all organic foods, as far as I know. The other shops at a well-known brand store that also is known for all organic food. Then I also have family who from a different generation who, kind of make fun of the whole thing of organic food. So I know there's definitely two ends of the spectrum. I mean, everybody in between as well. But the friends who buy as much organic as possible, prefer to eat only that, when asked why, I think they were drawn to the idea that it seems the most natural. Organic is seen as natural. Organic is seen as healthy. So when a friend had asked about chicken eggs and said, well, are having chickens worth it because it'll be organic? It will be these natural eggs. Nothing's done to them. It's like, well, like they're the same as the eggs in the store. Maybe people disagree. Maybe this is another topic. That's one of the things I've heard. Something else with organic, it was organic sugar. I didn't know there was organic sugar. I just figured sugar was sugar. The person that I spoke to about this she said, I think it can lead to cancer. That was not naive. That's something that she had heard. And she thought, well, if I can avoid doing something that could lead to cancer, who wouldn't, right? I don't know. I think it's kind of like what you said in the last question about, well, if I need to choose the safer bet, I might as well do organic. Then I can see why people choose this. Another point made by some that I'm thinking of are people that aren't as tied or don't have as strong of a, conviction to buy organic food. And they said, I think it was only 70% of the makeup or the process or the ingredients, whatever, in a food have to be organic for it to be stamped organic. So I guess my question to sum up, those are the rumors I've heard. To sum this up, what is organic actually? And maybe how do you classify it as such?
That's a good summary question. So I would say organic food is largely a label given to foods that undergo certain requirements as far as growing the food, what they can use on them for pesticides or pest control, and really just the entire process from the time that you plant it until the time that you harvest it until the time that it's given to the person. Organic has a lot of really weird labeling laws. So if anything is, quote, made with organic, that means it has to have at least 70% of the product needs to be certified with organic ingredients, which means 30% can be whatever it wants. Or the word organic itself means 95% has to be organic ingredients. And that's when you can get that, that little white and green label. And then you've got 100% organic, which means all ingredients must be certified and organic. There's a few, I think, really key things to point out in the topic. So number one, going back to kind of the health of things, the idea is that the soil that organic foods are grown in is superior, which would, in the minds of many people, means it has less heavy metals, it has less, harsh treatment to it. You can only use, you can't use synthetic pesticides on organic food. You can only use natural pesticides on organic food. And so there's all of these treatments that seem superior to products that are non-organic. The question, though, that you have to ask all of that is it true? Right? Is it really any more superior? Is the soil any better or not for us? And are these natural pesticides any better or not? And does that make that food healthier? And the answer to that is no, in this sense. All soil is going to have heavy metals. In fact, when we have tested certain vegetables, certain whole grain, whatever is grown in soil, we always find heavy metals in it because all soil has heavy metals. Just because that soil is organic does not mean it's not going to contain lead or arsenic or anything else. So that is unavoidable. To completely avoid those things, you would have to stop eating anything from the ground. The other question is okay, well, it must be better to use natural pesticides as opposed to synthetic pesticides, right? Not necessarily, because we're still using a form of pesticides, and those pesticides are still in larger quantities than you would ever find in nature. And those pesticides are likely less effective than synthetic pesticides, which probably means they're using a lot of them. And we don't really know, because of, how relatively new the organic stuff is that causing any health problems? So this idea that it's somehow completely without risk, and that all these foods that are non-organic are just these absolute atrocities and you should feel so much guilt for eating them or feeding them to your kids, we again don't have anything that necessarily says that. And we don't have anything that says that they have more nutrition in them. We just don't have anything that says that. Now, if again, for your family, in your belief system, you feel like you are, doing something by providing that type of food to your family over non-organic foods, and that's definitely, a call that you've got to make. And I'm not going to ever tell someone oh, don't worry about it, you should just go buy organic if they feel a deep conviction for, buying that way. But as far as calling it healthier or suggesting that, any of those other things, I haven't seen that.
This may seem like I'm asking the same question, but I'm not. What does the term organic mean? That's like when you look up a word in the dictionary and it's also could mean this or another form of this, and it states the same exact word. So I understand that to be a food to be considered organic, it needs to be 100% or 95 or the 70%. I get that. But what does the term organic mean?
I mean, the word or the term organic, whether you use it in the context of growing food or not, is natural, right? It's natural. So when you say it's 100% organic in any sort of a product, you're saying that everything in this product is organic, right? So you buy a kid's bar that happens to be, say, 100% organic. That means the oats in that kid bar was grown with all organic practices. The chocolate chips were created with all organic practices, including the dairy that made the chocolate, right? So every single ingredient in there is derived from that. Years ago, Cliff Bar was labeled. They had a label on there that said "made with organic ingredients," and then they stated 70% of the ingredients in here are organic, but that meant 30% of them wasn't. So
I know the answer to this, but this is one that has come up quite a bit. I think often people say, clients of yours or friends of mine will say, well, we bought organic, or, we eat a lot of this, but we get organic this food, organic crackers, organic bars for my kids, organic whatever. Or, gosh, the grocery bill has gone up because we started getting organic milk and organic vegetables. And I said, oh, well, we just get ours at Winco because a zucchini is a zucchini. And they're like, hey, but we get organic zucchini. I'm like, the nutrition is no different. So I think that's what I understand to be a misconception is organic food is more nutritious or has a different makeup to it where you're getting better nutrients than a non-organic food.
that's 100% not true. And like we can even go into the topic of eggs, right? So you buy white eggs at your local grocery store. You can also buy brown eggs. And then you'll see some brown eggs that are organic and have this high level of omega-3s in it, right? There's the same protein content, the same fat content, the same all of that content across the board in there. There is a conversion that has to take. So oftentimes what they're feeding chickens to get that level of omega-3s up is it's a food that has a certain type of fat in it that needs a conversion in the body for you to get that omega-3, which means they're saying that it's got a lot of omega-3, but it doesn't because of that conversion factor. Brown eggs, and we know this because we raise chickens, are no more nutritious than a white egg is. So a lot of that comes down to belief and really good marketing. And as far as like whole grains or vegetables or fruit, I mean, that's been a resounding and clear obvious in the data. Like there is no more nutrition packed into those. And then even as far as like, oh, well, the brown eggs have this really dark orange rich yolk, and that's just full of nutrients. That just means that they're eating more grass, right? So the green turns into like when we let our chickens free to roam and give them lots of extra feed, we get more orange yolks, and that's just because of the conversion from that food. So yeah, I think that if it's a pressing issue and it's important to you, you definitely should. But on the flip side, if you're feeling the pinch at the grocery store, you shouldn't feel bad about not buying it either and thinking that you're buying something inferior. And I'll say this, like when we get fruits and vegetables, we still wash them. And I think that if you get fruits and vegetables that are organic, you still need to do stuff like that, because even though the pesticides are quote organic, it doesn't mean they're completely free of risk. So I think that, it's just a good rounded way to look at things. And it's a topic that comes up all the time. I'll never forget working at the hospital, and a single mom came in with a child and had been under the assumption that she needed to buy organic food for them for a certain type of disorder that they had. And I knew that not to be true. And she became very emotional in the office because she could not afford to continue buying organic, but she thought she had to help her child. And it was just like this wave of relief that came over her when she realized she didn't have to. So yeah, who knows where you're at. But anyway, hopefully that helps provide some clarity on the organic topic. Next up.
I'm still hung up on part of the organic thing. So when I picture a strawberry, just because it doesn't have this like hard shell, right? It's, I don't know, porous, whatever. I can think of it as absorbing whatever is on it. When I picture a strawberry in a field where, let's just say, pesticides were sprayed on it, that's naturally going to go into the strawberry. If I picture a strawberry grown in a garden and then sold, to me, that is 100% organic. If nothing was ever sprayed on it, it's 100% organic. How can something that has chemicals that will go into the flesh of the fruit and into me be just the same as one that hasn't been? That to me does seem a little off.
Well, the difference that you're talking about is purchasing things at the grocery store that are not grown in a garden. They're grown on a massive organic farm and they're labeled that. And again, they are getting pesticides on them, although they are natural. And again, even if they're natural, it doesn't mean that they're without harm. In fact, the concentrations are usually higher because they're not as effective as synthetic. And again, that goes back to GMOs, where if now all of a sudden you're using a genetically modified strawberry that doesn't require as much synthetic pesticide, but still grows well, it's kind of the best scenario, because the organic pesticides could be in larger volumes and higher concentrations to prevent them. Going back to your question though about, what if I grew a strawberry in the garden? You're right. Like, that would be premium, but that would also be $25 for 8 strawberries for most people. Second to that, anyone who has ever had a garden and not put anything on their fruits and vegetables know it's either a full-time job to be out there managing those to grow without the pests getting them, or B, that you're really only picking like 30% of the potential fruit off of that because there's bugs that get in them and they destroy them. I mean, that's been true of the strawberries we've had. It's been true of the tomato plants we've had. And so you are right. In the absolute best case scenario, you are going to grow all of your own food and you're going to use absolutely nothing on it. But the biggest problem with that is you're not going to have much food. So you're going to have a ton of plants to be able to actually produce enough food that's going to last you, even a summer. We're not even talking about trying to get through winter and stuff.
Did I put pesticides on the buzzword list? Well, I think we need to add that, because I think I'm realizing that I am very much coming at this from the angle that many of the people are that we're referring to. I don't mean to refer to them as like bad. People that have concerns, which are, valid concerns, I see it the same as, oh, I'm spraying this pesticide. Like, it's a terrible term. That word sounds daunting, right? Like, it doesn't sound like, oh, I'm spraying, vitamins. It's pesticide. So I guess, I don't know if we can answer this now or if we need to add it to a future list, but it makes me wonder, well, what is a pesticide? We've been told to be scared of these things. What actually is in, they're all different, but what is in a pesticide?
This might be a rabbit trail for another time. But there's a couple important things to say here. They're not good. Like, we don't have we know, like, you take example like Roundup, which controls weeds, because it's not just pests, it's also weed control and it's all these other things. We know that exposure to Roundup has caused a ton of health problems for people over the years, right? So I'm certainly not saying that, oh, these are excellent products. In fact, you should buy them and drink them as though it was your evening, nightcap. It's not the case at all. What we do know, whether you like this or you don't like this, is a choice that you have to decide in your own house. But what we do know is that a lot of these foods are under extreme testing. And they are testing tolerable limits, right? As to whether or not this food has a tolerable limit of everything from pesticides to arsenic and heavy metals to all these things, right? We know that it's always within the tolerable limit, which to some degree you kind of have to accept if you're going to buy food at a grocery store. And so unless you're going to procure all of your food, there is to some degree some risk you are accepting by purchasing store-bought grocery. And so you can, yes, take it another step and wash it and do all of these things to it. But, you know, even if we know that they're not great, they're still not at a level that we know causes health concern, and they're constantly looking at that. But if you're still concerned, then I would wash them. And we do. I do take the time to wash them, as much as I can. It would be, I think, in my mind, I never really thought of it like this, but somewhat hypocritical for us to sit here and talk about carcinogens that are in grilled meat, and then I don't take the extra step to wash an apple off of something that, is an easy step to take just for insurance. But as far as you not having any risk at all with organic, it's also not necessarily true. I would take those same steps even if I were purchasing organic products. All right, next up, final one for this one is preservatives and additives. What you heard?
Shout out to those of you that know this question is from you, as well as all the others too. I'm referencing some close friends here, so hopefully they find this helpful. Preservatives, what comes to my mind are preserves, and that's what I've always thought of preservatives, is things that keep well. I grew up in a small rural town where most everybody preserved things by canning them, putting them in a bath full of salt, and then storing them in a cellar. So I guess I've seen this used well, or I assume well, because of all the food that people were able to produce or keep, I guess, themselves and store that. But preservatives, I don't feel like I heard as much about, honestly, until we met. And we were talking about, I think, was it meat? I like a meat and cheese platter. I could eat a full meat and cheese platter every day if I wanted. And you said, ideally, to eat so much of it or too frequently. I remember that being a concern because of the preservatives. And then the additives are something that I've just recently heard more about. Some friends were interested in doing sourdough, and they said, it's so much healthier because it doesn't have all of those additives. And other than the term additive, meaning you add something in, I have no idea what an additive is. That was a word, I think, that made me think of to do this list. I said, well, what are you adding? And they didn't know either. So I guess this question is coming from people that don't know what these things are, whether or not they're apprehensive to have them in foods. These are words that I think include a lot of categories. I don't know, a lot of ingredients that people don't really know. So there you go.
Well, you are 100% right. Like, the preservatives and additives are categorically could fit into anything, right? To a lot of different things. And this is what gets tricky with the term, because people tie preservatives and additives to the health of a food. And sometimes those preservatives and those additives are actually beneficial. Sometimes they're necessary, and sometimes they are harmful. I think the best thing to categorically put these into, the best way to describe them is they are things that are in food that you wouldn't just eat by themselves, right? Like, so for example, nitrates, that's in jerky. Nitrates are helpful because they preserve food, right? They keep food longer without getting foodborne illness. Jerky is a prime example of this. We've talked about this before. You're probably not going to go to the store, buy a bag of nitrate and eat it, right? It is a preservative or an additive to a food. And in this case, like we talked about in the last couple of podcasts, not necessarily a good one, but something that you would add to it. Going to like the bread conversation, you go to the grocery store, you buy a package of bread, and people nowadays are saying, well, bread's not good for you because there's all these preservatives and all of these additives to it. You read the bread packaging list, and there's words on there that, like, take, for example, thiamine. Thiamine is a vitamin. In fact, there would probably be some vitamin B, some thiamine deficient people in the US if we didn't add some of this back into our foods. But you're not going to just go to the grocery store, buy a bag of thiamine and start eating it, probably. So it is added to it. It is an additive, but it's also not a harmful additive. It's not making your food any worse, right? So the idea that additives and preservatives are bad are largely you really have to break them down one by one and tackle each one to try to determine whether or not it's a negative thing or not. Does that make sense?
This might be another buzzword, but I'm going to really ruffle some feathers. What about the red dye? What's the deal? I don't know if that's considered an additive or not, but supposedly it really can affect children and behavior. I first heard about it as a teacher, actually. People would say, please don't give, my student or my child whatever treats because they have this red dye in them. We won't say one way or the other whether you think that's a good choice or not, because if that's a good choice for their child and if it helps improve behavior, I would do just about anything. But where did that stem from? Is that even in this, or is that something else?
It's not in this. That's another rabbit hole that we can do 25 podcasts on if you want. But I mean, it could be considered an additive, but to go down the hole of behavioral stuff, like that's just another can. But I think this idea of preservatives and additives, the whole idea of there being preservatives and additives into our food and that automatically being a negative connotation really shouldn't be true at all. And I think the other thing that we could throw in here, another buzzword that's not included in this list, is packaged foods. There are a lot of packaged foods that could add an extreme amount of convenience to people's lives and are still very healthy, right? Prime example, microwave bagged rice. Like if all of a sudden you buy a rotisserie chicken and a thing of microwaved bagged rice, and now you have, quote, meal prepped, and that allows you to stay on track with your goals easier than, spreading out these black to-go containers and meal prepping all day on Sunday, like that is a packaged food and can definitely fit as part of a healthy diet. Another one would be, oh goodness sakes, this guy kills me. So there's a influencer personality on Instagram, and he talks about all of these different foods. He's got some crazy ideas, which we have largely debunked all of them, but nonetheless, he gets to talking about these drinks called Celsius, and he says, like, there's this caption of him reading to the studio audience, and he says, "Don't drink Celsius. It has cobalamin in it," and he goes on to say, it's like cyanide. So first of all, practice a little bit of logic in this and think, well, if all these people were truly drinking cyanide, probably wouldn't be a lot of people around. But it's a vitamin, and it's rendered inert whenever a person drinks it because of chemistry, and I won't go down that rabbit hole, but you have to really try to think. You have to really ask, like, what is this? You can't take these buzzwords and just take them all to the bank, because they're almost always never true. Now, this is just a little bit of a personal peeve. I don't know if I should say this or not. The only thing that bothers me in the world of nutrition is when someone speaks so matter-of-factly against something and they're wrong. They say something so astutely and it's not true. And what bothers me about it is that you're confusing other people. And so you have like a whole society full of people who have no idea what to eat anymore because they've heard so much stuff. And I think like the biggest message for the whole buzzword topic here is to do what you think is the best for you and your family, make the best steps that you can, and just trust that it's good. It's good enough.
I think that's something that we've talked about a lot, is that, this all didn't just change all of a sudden the last few years when social media and influencers and technology, was able to like blast all this all over the place. Like, yes, we've learned some things are better to do over time. Like, don't have a ton of salt and don't, smoke, and like those seem very obvious. But I think something that I feel like we're constantly, when we talk about this and how frustrated we are the people that we care about are so frustrated about all of this information is that they're not able to trust what they know. I think they sit and think, I'm missing something. I'm missing something. What if I'm like poisoning my family on accident? I think you're not going to accidentally poison your family by getting a certain type of food, I guess. And that sounds, I don't know, that might sound silly, but I think that's the feel that I get when I hear these questions from people. They're thinking, oh no, there's got to be some hidden agenda in these food producers that they're trying to get me, and I'm going to really do damage. So it's like you're saying, when people give blanket statements like all preservatives are bad, all GMOs are this, everyone who does non-organic is unhealthy, I think it breeds a lot of fear into a lot of people. I think that's the frustrating part. It's not just that people don't know what they're talking about, because you wouldn't expect them to. It's that when they use that, I don't know what's the right thing that they do, but
No, you're 100% right. You're 100% right. I mean, that's just the truth of it. And this is a question that was asked, sent to me just a few days ago. And he says this. So this is somebody who's actually in Foundations Plus right now. He said, I've been wanting to ask, but I wasn't sure if it was appropriate during class. I've read Eat Smarter, and I'm currently reading Sleep Smarter. Both of them are by Sean Stevenson. He goes down the rabbit hole once in a while, which intrigues me, but the one thing that you both agree on is it's simple. And here's the biggest thing. You can ask one question to several doctors and get different answers. What advice do you have for deciphering conflicting information? It used to be that you could say, look at that person's credentials, and if they are credentialed in a certain area, they should be practicing evidence-based practice, which means they're operating out of science, not emotion. They're not trying to sell something. Unfortunately, we don't live there anymore, right? Like, it pretty much anyone can say anything they want, and if they have a large following or credentials, they could still be saying outlandish stuff, selling a crazy product, and get by with it. I have a hard time knowing how to answer this without going like to that credential piece. What advice would you have?
well, it's hard because I'm married to you, but I guess as someone that doesn't have the schooling, I don't have a credential. I don't have much of it wasn't even common sense to me. I grew up in a small town where everybody still eats all the same. You had meat that you most likely harvested yourself, whether that be on a farm or hunting. You had something green or some sort of vegetable that most people grew in their garden. And then you had, I don't know, like, I guess fatty dairy, which isn't important, but I just remember that being part of it. I knew you eat balanced, that I think when people gained weight, they would change their diet and try to eat more healthier foods and less fattier foods, and they would lose it. Like, to me, it's just, I guess, that simple. And so when I look at experience of, when my numbers went bad, right? Like, I had super high A1C and high cholesterol when we first got married, and I was not making good habits. I didn't know. I said, well, what does he say? He's the professional, because he has had to learn and put into practice this evidence-based information. When I followed this advice that he said, it worked, and my numbers improved and my health improved and I felt better. Not because my husband said it or because, this Instagram guy or girl said it. It's because it worked. I think about I don't mean to get on a soapbox. I think about our pediatrician. We trust him more than other pediatricians that we have seen, because when we have followed his advice, it has been effective in meeting the goals we have for our family, for our kids' health, for feeling comfortable about, how we're going to treat different things that they run into, that sort of thing. So I think the peace of mind, honestly, is what I would say to follow. And it's tricky because I know that in saying that, I have good friends whose peace of mind is found in things that I do not think are true. I think find people you trust and ask them the questions. And not everyone, it's tricky because not everyone's going to trust you. I mean, we have been at park playdates, we've been at birthday parties where someone will say, she said this about bread. What do you say, Kyle? And it's very uncomfortable for you to say, I say, no, that's not, that information you're saying is not accurate. We haven't seen that. You're very gracious about it, but I mean, I don't know. Maybe I don't have an answer either. I've had good friends that have been pulled, they'll talk to someone that has the research, and then they'll talk to somebody who, I'm not trying to be sarcastic, is an Instagram influencer who says that this is coming up in a week or so, but that says seed oils are bad. And they, for whatever reason, they can't resolve that tension. So I trust you, not just because you're my husband, because I've seen that the advice that you give plays out accurately and it matches with what we see. But
No, I think that that's great. And it is hard to say go with your gut because you're always going to go the conservative route. And the conservative route, unfortunately, right now is the most extreme. Here's what I would probably say to that. If you are in conversation with a person and a person's citing all of these statistics to you, ask questions. How do you know that? Well, what do you mean by preservatives? You heard that there's all these preservatives in bread. Like what preservatives do you mean? They'll probably won't know. And if they do know, then I would say again, like, well, what does it mean that bread's got thiamine added to it and yeast extract? Like, what are those? Why are those bad for you? If at any point in that they can't tell you, I don't know that I would believe it, to be honest with you. I know that seems like being manipulative or you're pressing someone. But if they're going to make that type of a statement to you and make you go alter your grocery bill or whatever, they should at least, we all should, you shouldn't just listen to this and take everything I say to the bank. Go look at it, go research it, and take all of these things and find out for yourself if it's true or not. If you see something online and you hear two conflicting informations, and either of those are selling you a product or they're selling you whatever, then I would not buy it. I would not go with that person. If someone is at the end of the day trying to sell you something, that's whenever I would be skeptical. And if it's someone that you're in conversation with, I would just ask questions. And if at the end of that, they give you a compelling reason to stop buying that product, then don't buy it. If it helps you sleep better, even if I tell you that, oh, there's no literature that says that, if it makes you feel more comfortable to take the more conservative route, at the end of the day, like that's all we're all trying to do. We are all just trying to make the best set of decisions for our family that we can based on the knowledge that we've got. And whatever makes you feel the most comfortable with that, that's what you should do.
If people are like us, or like me at least, where they want to know just down to the core, where did this stem from? What does this mean? Is there a place that the regular, I say regular meaning not a licensed dietitian, has access to this information? Because I recently had somebody, I can't remember what we were talking about, something I think nutrition related. If not, it was health related. They said, well, I got on the .gov site and so I could trust that one, right? Or I got on, when it's .org versus, I didn't Google it. Like I did. I think we could all probably agree that a random person on Instagram might not be the best reliable, even if what they say is some of it's true, right? Let's be honest. But is there a website? Is there a library of peer-reviewed articles, not article, but like the actual research instead of just the article written about the research? Is there somewhere that somebody like me or the friends that, ask us these questions and discuss this, is there somewhere that we have access to know for sure this is based off research science?
Yes, but to be completely transparent to you, you're going to have to invest time that you don't have to go look it up. You're going to also go to a place like, you can go to PubMed and search it, and it's going to give you the abstract for just about any article that you want. But to be honest with you, you have to then know how to interpret that data. The thing that's also important about all of this as you research it is you're going to find a study, you're going to find hundreds, thousands of studies that say different things, and some of them conflict. So you have to know, what are you looking for within the studies? You can go that route. I would discourage you from doing it because it could just be a endless discouraging rabbit trail. What you should do instead is go to a respected, trusted organization. and figure out what they are saying about it. That could be a university, that could be a major medical center, that could be like a major medical center being like Johns Hopkins, for example. You can go to some of these large organizations, universities, things like that can be trusted. The reason I would suggest going there is because they are taking, and they have people employed that are professionals, where we go through and we look at the collective data. What is all the studies that have been done on this specific topic? What is the general consensus, right? After all these different researches that have been done, and after all these different people that have been studied, what's the general consensus say? Because you can find a topic to read the way you want it to read, but it doesn't really matter if it's a very small sample size and a poorly done study. You have to get an idea of what the general consensus of a topic is. And, that's going to take time. If you really want to know the heart of it, it's going to take time for every topic.
So just to take this a step further, just a minute ago, you said, find these, well-known, renowned medical establishments, these organizations, research hospitals, things like that. I feel like considering people we know and being more on the critical side of things, someone could hear that and say, well, who is this dietitian in Idaho running his mouth? But how does that make you any more credible? How do people come to trust you versus them? Because to everybody else, you're just a guy that got a degree too.
100%. You're 100% right. I would say to that, this is my answer. It's going to sound more arrogant than I want, but it's the only way I know to answer this. And I would say that you apply this broadly, not just to me, but really to everyone. And this goes back to exactly what you said about our pediatrician who we love. Do they pass the test of time? Do they pass the litmus test? Have what these people, who are saying these things, have they ever led you astray before? Have they ever given you poor information before? Have they given you good information to where they provide information to you, you go and apply it, and what they suggested would happen happens? If those things are true, it's honestly about the only thing that you've got, right? And whether that's true of me or whatever, that's not. I'm saying broadly, that's what I would take and suggest.
And I would say, I guess from my side of it, because you could say this till you're blue in the face so people won't buy it, I think you are so open to hearing misconceptions, to hearing things that people don't know if it's true. Even this person that wrote in and saying, how do I know who to believe? Is this appropriate to bring it up? Of course it's appropriate to bring it up. But I would say, this is for me directly, if there's any topic or rumor or ingredient or whatever, something that you've heard or wondered about, reach out, like privately, whatever. In person, I think people are nervous. They don't want to look like they're stupid or like they don't know. And I guarantee you, I have asked every single question that you're thinking already in the last 10 years that we've been married. But I mean, I think that's the thing, is ask it, like, because you're usually not shocked. You're very open, and you have the crazy amount of knowledge in your head to be able to say, oh, I think it's from this, or if not, I know, I can look it up, or I can ask someone that does know better than I do. So I'd say do that. Like, don't sit and live with all these rumors that you hear from people that are sometimes well-meaning and sometimes running their mouth. But please reach out, whether you email or call, or I don't know if they're allowed to call or text you, but whatever they're allowed to do to get a hold of you, do it. Even if you think like, oh my gosh, this is silly, just send in the questions, because I promise you I've asked worse.
Yeah, that's 100% true. You can always ask me if you're comfortable doing that. I think my favorite part of Valley to Peak is the questions that we get and being able to talk to you guys. So you're always welcome to do that. So any questions about this or at any point in the future, feel free to send them to info@v2pnutrition.com. We will be back again here in a couple weeks as we cover the rest of these, which will be processed food, seed oils, saturated fat, inflammation and antioxidants, and I am sure that will get Western. So you'll want to hear that one. Have a great week, everybody. Thanks for listening to the podcast. We appreciate you joining us. We will have part 2 coming back again in 2 weeks, where we'll cover the remainder of the topics. And if you have any questions, of course, you can send those to us at info@v2pnutrition.com. We appreciate you tuning in and checking it out. If you felt like this information was good, or maybe you've had conversations on these topics with friends of yours or family members or what have you, it would be awesome if you would forward them this, maybe suggest that they listen to it. We don't obviously do any advertising, and the way that this podcast has grown so much is just because of that. You guys have sent it to other people and continued to listen, and we are truly grateful for that. So thank you for listening. Thank you for passing the word on. We hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you again here in another couple of weeks. Have a great week, everyone.